on the 28 that is in respective states there that are claiming for the right. Then 3, I am advocating the possibility of the National Assembly to have only one house, so that there will be only one chamber at the National Assembly, and this one chamber should have 2 representatives from each of the states of the Federation that should go there as members of the National Assembly. 4, I'm advocating that the system at the National Assembly should equally be clearly a part-time basis, some kind of legislature, so that they will be able to have time to be with the citizenry at the grassroots there, to be able to be knowing so much about what are the people's needs, demands, and aspirations.
Yes, I think we have. They've been just showing me that we have one minute since.
Yes, I want to say that why I do not disagree with him. The idea of political re-engineering of having deputy, anything that will consume more money because of structures and personnel, I'm not in support of it. But I agree, for example, we should have only one parliament and it should be part-time, and their salary and allowances should be pegged. But I want my own socio-economic structuring to affect all aspects of our life, that the interest of the collective will always dominate that of individual interest. For example, you say you want people to go to rural area, then make sure that the salaries of those going to rural area, or teachers or doctors, are a little bit higher than those in the urban areas.
Yes.
Make sure that you want to advance technologically. That's part of restructuring. Then make sure that the salary of polytechnic graduates are at par, if not more, than those who get degrees in English or history.
Oh, okay. We're still coming back to what the elder statesman said, Philip Asiodu, that we are chasing shadows with innuendos in the political scenario. I remember late Ibrahim Tahir Talwa was saying that the elites and politicians, Nigerians, are tired of their shenanigans and the picadillos. Is that what you people are saying?
Yes. The elites are the problems we are having. They are responsibly consuming most of our resources and then creating problems for the remainder of the population.
Yes. Whether unitary, non-unitary, democracy, 30-year system of government,
patriotism, what we discipline, and nation.
You need socio-economic
restructuring, and fundamentally, just as the professor said, the fight against corruption is extremely paramount. For Nigeria to have a system that nobody complains and all this time. We should have a system that operates. Thank you very much.
And the attempt to defeat the narrative of corruption must be defeated. The greatest problem we have is that of corruption. And if we can deal with it, our problem will be reduced.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Femi Odekunle. We know it is a continuous discussion, actually. Yes, Nasara. Umar, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Well, I know you develop a lot of framework in order to bring this to the fore for the government. Maybe the House of Assembly, perhaps you will going to sponsor a private bill?
Well, I will think about that.
Well, we have a lot of things.
We are finished.
Yes, we finished.
They will never do that.
No.
They will never.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I am Aliyu Bababaro. Thank
Was there any time Nigeria was not Nigeria?
At that time, by the 1950s, principles mattered. But today, it is not principle, opportunism.
I was part of the first set of Nigerian cadets that started the Nigerian Navy.
You cannot say you love God if you don't love your country.
Which one did I prefer at that time? And I said, the one that called me evil genius. You are evil, you are a genius.
Once you've laid the right foundation at primary school, the sky is the limit.
I don't say you should knock off where you come from, because that's really what helps to mold you into what you are.
When I became president, it was estimated that 60% of our people were living below the poverty data.
Taxation, that depressing but constant reality on the minds of everyone.
On a particular spot might turn out to be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Mie Ogidi for Deadline 360.
It is obvious that's a negative relationship between taxes and business.
The government in bringing development to the grassroots. For Deadline 360, I'm Emmanuel Lene.
To generate electricity through nuclear energy, precautionary measures has to be taken. I am Muhammad Nasir reporting for Deadline 360.
Laws and regulations guiding revenue generation in Nigeria.
If the rent gets down to the landlords and business operators, it will eventually make them increase their service charge.
It's good to have you join us this week. I'm Hawa Salih.
Imagine a station where you access information. Think of a station that creates awareness for national development. Imagine a station that prepares you for a bright and greater future. A station for all ages. Documentaries, classroom and television, events coverage, children's programs and variety shows. Always stay tuned to NTA Knowledge on the Star Times platform, Channel 359. For partnership, sponsorship and advert placements, contact us on NTA Knowledge. NTA Knowledge, learning to broaden horizon.
Was there any time Nigeria was not Nigeria?
At that time, by the 1950s, principles mattered. But today, it is not principle, opportunism.
I was part of the first set of Nigerian
President Buhari's health, presidency formally reacts to protesters calling for the return or resignation of the president.
Wife of the president challenges parents to promote 6 months exclusive breastfeeding.
Acting SGF warns against harassment of security operatives.
Today on Good Morning Nigeria, we focus on ways to change the narrative of out-of-school children phenomenon. Plus, Anambra after the Azobulu massacre. That's right.
Now, recent statistics released by UNICEF indicate that Nigeria has 10.5 million out-of-school children, the highest in the world.
Now, quite right, Kyria, that the figure, that's 10.5 million, it's actually more than 50% of the 20 million children that are out of school in the world.
Well, a breakdown of the figure shows that 60% of the out-of-school children in Nigeria is from the northern region, and girls are mostly affected.
Now, this development is a source of concern to key players in the education sector in the country, including, in particular, of course, the Federal Ministry of Education.
Well, Kingsley, this formed one of the major issues discussed at the just concluded 62nd National Council on Education meeting held in Kano.
The National Assembly, too, is worried about the development, as the Senate President, Dr. Saraki, has described the situation as alarming, indeed adding that it is a ticking time bomb.
Of course, yes. And apart from the government officials, non-governmental organizations and individuals, both within and outside Nigeria, are calling for urgent action to address the huge challenge.
Now, an education activist, Malala Yousafzai, we all know her, of course, during her recent visit to Nigeria, called again on the federal government to declare a state of emergency in the education sector.
So, what is the council's decision to change the narratives? Why is Nigeria still having the challenge of out-of-school children? What is really wrong with all the intervention programs in the education sector?
And precisely, why has the out-of-school children figure, as it were, remained as it is for quite some time now? Well, these and some other questions, as my colleague Kirian has indicated, matters that were discussed at the recent National Council on Education issues will be taken on in a part of our discussion segment on the program. This is Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to this edition of the program, reaching you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest TV network, the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I am Kirian Umar. I say welcome to Tuesday's edition of the program. Well, Kingsley, we will also look at Anambra after the massacre at Ozubolo. And how are the people recovering from this shock?
Well, in addition to those two items that we're taking out of the conversation segment, we'll have our usual complementary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, sports, as well as an entertainment. Of course, the IAAF Athletics Championship is continuing in London, and unfortunately, Nigeria hasn't fared well in the middle distances. All right, so let's go over now to our colleague, Anne Jubuno, for the morning news. She's right here with us in the studios. Anne, how are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Here's the day's news. The presidency has formally reacted to the protest march embarked upon by a pressure group calling for the return or resignation of President Muhammadu Buhari for being away from the country for over 90 days. The senior special assistant to the president on media and publicity, Garba Shehu, who spoke to State House correspondents, said the people only exercise their constitutional rights, which the government fully respects. He, however, said demanding the president's return or resignation by the people is stepping outside the laws of the country.
Anyone conversant with the constitution of the country will have noticed, would have seen that the president has complied 100% with the requirements of the constitution of this country. He has handed over power to the vice president in line with the constitution, and the vice president is carrying out with the affairs of the country. He is undertaking activities of government in line with the constitution in a way that the president has himself given words of commendation. So the president has not breached any law. What he has done is perfectly in line with the constitution of this country. And if people are looking for things to say, I think they should do their research very well.
Acting President Yemi Osinbajo says Nigeria is not only a compelling destination for investment, but one that also deserves a fresh look by any serious entrepreneur looking to invest in Africa. Speaking at an interactive meeting with the Nigerian Initiative for Economic Development, the acting president assured investors that their investment can only increase.
In Nigeria, in 10 years' time, they'll be queried by their establishments or by their businesses.
fact, you just miss out on the best possible opportunity. The truth of the matter is that if you are really serious about investing in Africa, this is where you have to come to. This is a very, very, very good place to do business, and it's going to be a profitable place, and it will be very profitable for all of us.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation now has a new anti-corruption committee that will promote its accountability and transparency initiative. Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Dr. Meikante Baru, who inaugurated the committee, asked members not to shy away from dealing with proven cases of corruption, no matter who is involved.
Some of them served under my leadership. We'll take on from where we stop and look at other ways, look at the areas where our staff are more exposed, and further down ensure that they effectively make the staff safe from committing corrupt practices.
Wife of the President, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, has challenged parents to promote the 6 months exclusive breastfeeding to enhance the health of children and mothers. She stated this in a message to the Health Walk as part of a week-long activities to mark 2017 World Breastfeeding Week, organized by her pet project, Future Assured program, in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Health and other development partners.
It has been shown to be very beneficial, not only to the baby, but to the mother. To the baby, it's the first immunization that the baby will have, because that first milk, what we call the colostrum, offers a lot of antibodies that is acquired from the mother to the child, thereby protecting the child from diarrheal diseases, upper respiratory tract infections, and several others.
I think it's a great outreach because it's in a strategic location, which is a market area where you find the common man, and I think they're very much excited because they're not used to seeing these kind of outreaches.
The Minister of Defense, Mansour Dan Ali, says the military has developed special forces to counter incidents of ambush. The minister said this while at the Nigerian Army Special Forces School in Buniyadi, Yobe State.
There is a program that we intend to start with. It's a pilot program whereby in this training institution they are going to train civil defense, police, and other security agents that will relieve you of some of your position. They will take over, you will move further.
And the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, has restated the commitment of the troops in bringing an end to Boko Haram insurgency. The Chief of Air Staff was speaking while addressing the media after a closed-door meeting with his lieutenants in Maiduguri, Borno State.
We want to assure Nigerians that we continue to do our best. We are working around the clock with the support of government. We have reactivated a number of airplanes, some of which are here flying in Maiduguri, and some are in different locations also flying and fighting to make sure that our society is secured, and we'll continue to do that.
The Acting Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Dr. Habiba Lawal, warns that any citizen caught in flagrant disobedience to laws and assault of security operatives on their duty post will face the full wrath of the law. The warning is coming on the heels of recent attacks on staff of the Federal Road Safety Corps in some parts of the country. Emmanuel Ayimero reports that at the strategic meeting to address these anomalies, those in attendance are seeking ways to bring such incidences under check.
I will enjoin the Corps to work closely with the Federal Ministry of Justice and the various state counterparts to ensure that all genuine cases in relation to citizens taking laws into their hands are duly prosecuted.
Well, that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll continue after the break.
If you
hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Now to business and Good Morning Nigeria. Oil prices edged lower on Monday, sliding from 9 weeks high as Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment says Nigeria's industrial sector outlook is edging up. Details on these and other stories on business with Kolo Mohammed.
Hello and welcome to Business News. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment Okechukwu Enelama says the Nigerian industrial sector outlook is edging up as policies and programs of the government are vigorously in pursuit of investments in industrial and other critical sectors of the economy. He noted that with resilience, the requisite know-how in branding and packaging, Nigerian locally produced products will begin to gain global market competitiveness.
But the good news is that every country that has then invested, in producing and consuming what it produces, making sure that they patronize their own goods, have evolved, and Nigeria will also evolve. And if you try and look at the empirical evidence, if you try and look at what has happened, let me just use one example. Cables made in Nigeria are considered superior to cables that are imported.
In another development, Nigeria's Minister of Industries, Trade and Investment, Dr. Okechukwu Enelama, has been elected as the new vice chairperson of the World Trade Organization representing Africa. For the 11th World Trade Organization WTO Ministerial Conference, his election was decided at the WTO General Council meeting on July 26th. The Ministerial Conference, which meets biannually, is the key decision-making body of the organization. Economic analysts believe his election is indicative of the significant role Nigeria is playing at the WTO and her robust trade policy initiatives. The conference brings together members of the organization, all of which are countries and customs unions and can take decisions on matters under any of the multilateral trade agreements. It also meets as the dispute settlement and trade policy review body to oversee procedures for settling disputes between members and to analyze members' trade policies. Elsewhere, United consumers cut back on spending for a third month in July as house price growth slowed sharply, dealing yet another blow to the economy. The broad-based weakness is being blamed on a squeeze on pockets as inflation outpaces wage growth, as well as concerns about the health of the economy. The latest figures leave both household expenditure and the property market at their weakest in more than 3 years. A report from Market and Visa showed that consumer spending dropped 0.8% year-on-year, with clothing, household goods, food and transport among the worst hit. Oil prices edged lower on Monday, sliding away from 9 weeks highs as worries lingered over high production from OPEC and the United States. Global benchmark Brent crude futures were down 65 cents at 51.77 cents a barrel, and U.S. crude futures were down 59 cents at 48.99 per barrel. Both contracts stood more than $1 below the levels hit last week, which marked their highest since late May, when oil producers led by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, extended a deal to reduce output by 1.8 million barrels per day until the end of next March. That's Business News. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Kolo Mohammed, for the business package and Good Morning Nigeria. Next, we go to the front pages of some of today's newspapers to check out what the headlines are.
All right, newspaper reviewer Bayo Toyabe is already here in the studio with us. Bayo, good morning and welcome to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kylian. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley.
All right, Kingsley. Okay, let me kickstart. With the Nigerian Tribune. The Tribune has a great deal of stories here. Just below the nameplate, we have no decision taken on Kano chairman, says APC. The story is on page 32, and I hope you can have that. That's actually on the front page of the Tribune. No decision taken on Kano chairman, says APC. I hope you can get that now. And then following that story closely is don't tamper with Kogi APC Exco. Melaye, Kadri, others warn Odige Oyegun. That's on page 33 of the Tribune. And now 500 million Naira farm produce destroyed in Jigawa downpour. Page 10. That's not a good story there for Nigeria. And now, Nigeria needs accountable, God-fearing leaders. Mina, Gusau Anglican bishops. Okay, that's from Mina, Gusau African bishops. Now, page 32 has that story on the Tribune. And then below that, our foundation calls for nominations. Page 32. That's on 2017 Obafemi Awolowo Prize for Leadership. Okay, and the main headline on the Tribune says, Anti-Buhari protest rocks Abuja. With riders, he should resume or resign, group says. Protesters exercising their rights, no vacuum in governance, says the presidency. And Aisha Buhari returns to London on page 9. And then he should resume or resign, group says it's on page 38 of the Tribune. And of course, below is the photograph of those protesting, led by Charlie Boy. Okay. Now, there are other stories here. What next as contractors pull out of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway? I'd like Bayo to come in here when it is time, because Lagos-Ibadan Expressway has been there over the years. In fact, previous governments have come across that road, and it remains the same. That's on page 31. Then court orders final forfeiture of $37.5 million mansion linked to Diziani Alice Madueke. That story is on page 10. And then Southwest PDP leaders demand sanction against Kashamu. Exclude him from special convention. Page 33 is where we get the details of that story. And below the photograph, we have this ugly situation in Anambra State. How family of 3 died in Anambra massacre. Gunman's bullet pierced through a woman's back to kill her baby. Suspects arrested. Death toll rises. Masop gives 7-day ultimatum to police. The story is on page 30 of the Tribune. Kingsley.
All right, as you indicated, there's a busy front page there for the Nigerian Tribune. Let's take a look now at This Day newspaper. This Day leads at the bottom half of its front page with the matters arising from the Ozobulu attack. It's anxiety envelops Ozobulu as community fears reprisal attacks, with 3 riders. Oshibajo vows to bring perpetrators to justice, and then police arrests suspects, and Obiano declares statewide mourning. Now, that's the lead story, along, of course, with the riders to that lead story. Anxiety envelops Ozobulu as community fears reprisal attacks. And then below that, a story that Kieran read from the Tribune earlier. It's also come along to the other front pages of the other papers we'll be taking a look at presently. Protesters storm Abuja, ask Buhari to return home. Details of the story can be found on page 10. Now, let's move up now to the other half of This Day newspaper. Says, that's below the nameplate, says, genocide looms. Atiku warns as Igbo leaders and Northern youth meeting over quit notice ends in deadlock. It says, genocide looms. Atiku warns as Igbo leaders and Northern youth meeting over quit notice ends in deadlock. That's from This Day newspaper. Then above The nameplate of this day newspaper, it's a court orders permanent forfeiture of Alice Imaduke's $37.5 million Banana Island mansion. That's in greater detail on page 8. And of course, there are stories from the oil sector there indicating NNPC clears JV cash call debts by April 2018. JV stands for joint venture. Bayo.
Yes, there's fear, palpable fear in Ozubulu over fear of reprisals. But there have been several perspectives to the development. This is because of the attack at the St. Philip's Catholic Church that happened on Sunday. The acting president, who condemned the action as despicable act of violence, has said he's been in touch with Governor Obiano, the police and the security agencies, and he's assuring that all those who are behind the murder in the church will be brought to justice. Meanwhile, the Commissioner of Police, Garba Umaru Baba, says that some arrests have been made and Governor Obiano has also confirmed. However, this day reporter who visited Ozubulu says that there is Ugu Oye Junction, which is usually bubbling and the market is always lively, but on yesterday the place was quiet. The church where the killing happened has also been deserted. In fact, one paper report that it has been sealed up. A family man, his wife and his baby, unfortunately were killed. One family, 3 of them were killed. That was the report that Kirian, you read about bullet piercing the baby, the mother, and also the father was killed. In all, 9 women, 1 baby, and 2 men were killed. The chairman local government of Ekusigo local government area, Mr. Ikenna Ofodeme, says about 27 persons are still in hospital and they are in stable condition. Those who came in, others who came in have been discharged and they have gone back home. He has also opined that it is not true that the killing was motivated by feud between drug lords. He says he suspects what he described as political undertone. Meanwhile, there is a group that describes itself as Union of All Angry, Vexed and Frustrated Nigerians. They marched through the streets of Abuja yesterday protesting and demanding that the president either resume or resign, saying that he cannot remain in London indefinitely. However, the special assistant to the president on media, Garba Shehu, says the protesters reserve the right to have a peaceful opportunity to protest in the democracy. However, by making demands that is alien to the Constitution, they are probably overstepping their bounds. He said the president has complied with the Constitution by constitutionally meeting the requirement of transmitting power to the vice president, who is now acting president. Invariably, there is no power vacuum. Governance is continuing, and government would not be distracted by that group making such call. They are referring to a section of the Constitution, Section 145, that requires the president to transmit power to the vice president, particularly if he is on vacation or not available for governance. The other report that has dominated the newspapers is also the forfeiture. You will recall that the Lagos High Court on July 19th gave notice that owners of the property and the sums of money should come and make claim, otherwise the temporary forfeiture that was granted will become full. Now, as at the expiration of that, and since there was nobody to appear in court, a building that is said to have 24 apartments, 8 flats, and 6 penthouses, and also sums of money that was about $2.74 million and 84.5 million naira has been forfeited. That was part of rent. The AFCC had gone to court alleging that $37.5 million was paid for to purchase the apartment, and they were suspicious that it was proceeds from unlawful activities. A former minister of petroleum and a lawyer who was alleged to have purchased it, as well as the company, were expected as defenders to come, but none of them showed up, and therefore the property has been forfeited to the federal government.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much. Just, Kieran, what I found a bit interesting with regard to the reports on the forfeiture order on the property allegedly owned by the former Minister of Petroleum is how the property has been described. I've read 24 apartments and 8 flats, and then 6 penthouses. A penthouse is distinct, you know that. What is the difference between an apartment and a flat? The Americans will say apartments, the British will say flat. So I've read 24 apartments, 8 or 18 flats. What is the difference?
Are you surprised?
I hope they have the right property so that they don't go elsewhere.
There's always a mixed mask about the American and English terminology.
This route.
You talked about Lagos-Ibadan Expressway.
I grew up hearing about Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. So why has that road not been tidied up for as long as
that was the first dual carriageway in the country. And since it was built, it has suffered several characteristics of our lack of maintenance. It has suffered several things. The earlier controversy over it was about concession. That has apparently been resolved, and there's a review of it, and the project is currently ongoing.
Yeah, that's right. But, no, but there's reconstruction work that is ongoing and is divided into a number of sections.
Previous governments have awarded such that contract.
No, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. This has to do.
Will it go on forever? That's the point.
I agree with you.
1999, that road has been there. It's been each government had to award that contract of Lagos Ibadan Expressway, very important road in the southwest. Yet to date, it's still being now. The contractors just pulled out of the place.
This has to do with financing arrangements. It's ongoing for the minister, of course, will take this up and then see what needs to be done. Let's continue.
All right, okay. I have the authority now. Above the nameplate, we have the stories on the authority newspapers. Group applaud IGP over promotion. That's on page 10. Then court orders for future. We have that story in other newspapers. It's on page 4 of authority. Gunmen abduct 15 passengers of Lagos-bound bus. That's a new development now. It used to be Kaduna, Abuja Road. Now it's Lagos. On page 4 of authority, the anti-Igbo song "Dangerous for Nigeria" says Atiku. Is on page 4 of the authority. And of course, where the major headline of Zubulu shootings, we have read that in other papers. Church sailed now. 300 priests mourn victims. Community insists attack was terrorism. Masop gives security agencies 1 week to arrest killers. All right, now you can see the photograph of Charlie Boy and his group who are protesting that the president should return or resign. And below that, resume or resign. Yes, the same story. He won't quit, says the presidency. That's of the authority. And that's all about what I have here, Kingsley.
All right, let me just take the Nigerian pilot very quickly. Nigerian pilot has, just below the nameplate of the Nigerian pilot, says Anambra church killings, police nab suspects. That's on page 10 in greater detail. And the latest story says, with a double-decker headline, Dubai-bound Nigerian nabbed with 849 ATM cards. And the number of cards are listed there as a rider, 849. That's almost reversing that somewhere, 419. Details of that story can be found on page 9. Now, the headline, that's the second lead story on the front page, beware of Rwandan deja vu. Atiku warns and condemns song disparaging Ndigbo and says promoters of hate should be wary of consequences. That's on page 5. And below that, you have a window of headlines. Aisha Buhari returns to London. Verification exercise. Delta set to recover some 12 billion naira. Enough of lawlessness and attacks on law enforcement agencies. That's according to the federal government. Southern senators and reps didn't sell out on power devolution. That's on page 2. And power outage, NEC, Electricity Regulatory Commission, orders BEDC, that's the Benin Electricity Distribution Company, to make refund to Warri community.
Okay, just before Bayo comes in to wrap it up, let's go to Daily Trust now, quickly. Federal government lists 27, that's below the nameplate. Federal government lists 27 industries to enjoy tax holiday. Towards the right, court orders final for future. Okay, we've read that over a mansion linked to Desiane. Then Boko Haram militants kill 34 in Borno. And the major headline, presidency says Buhari won't quit. No time limit for president's resumption, says Falana and Ali. And then we have below that the photograph of over 400 jerry cans of petrol seized by the Nigerian Customs Service along Mubi, Madagali Highway in Adamawa State, being handed over to the National Security and Civil Defense for destruction in Yola. That was just yesterday. And besides that, we have Kano APC announces Abbas as chair. Abuja dismisses the process. Page 33 has details of that story. Then India buys first U.S. crude deal threaten Nigerian market? Bayo.
Thank you, Kirian. Well, there are two revival impetuses that are very, very significant. The first is the 27 new industries that have been accorded what is called qualified tax holidays. This is an incentive that is to encourage such industry to boost the manufacturing impetuses of boosting the economy. The second one is also that 6 fertilizer blending plants have been revived. This is done by the Sovereign Industries Authority, where the managing director, Mr. Uche Oji, briefed the Minister of Information, and he says that by the time those blend plants come on mainstream, we will now have 17 functioning blending plants, and that will boost the impetuses for agriculture. However, the matter of concern is the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, has said that in his lifetime, 2 things are his aspirations: that the civil war is a war we should never have fought, and secondly, the war is one war too many, and his prayer is that never shall Nigeria witness another war again. And it's very alarming. On the social media now is hate song that is being circulated, and that is why the former vice president was drawing quick attention to. We should not forget that Rwanda, it was such circulation of on the media that led to the killing of over 800,000 persons. So the earlier the security agencies needed this in the bud, the better for all of us.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. That's of course the most that we can take. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, the federal government was talking about taking the very tough action against purveyors of hate speech. Yes. Speech doesn't consist only, when you write some lengthy epistle or you deliver a harangue. It also can be embedded in songs, just as the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has indicated. We hope that is taken up. Bayo, but that's the much we can take in our discourse review segment. Thank you for being here. See you tomorrow midweek. All right, it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break. When we return, of course, we'll be taking on out-of-school children phenomenon plus Ozobulu after the Sunday massacre.
This week, your rib-cracking comedy, Professor John Bull, takes a swipe at how we think we belong among the human race while others do not belong.
Albinos, a hunchback, and everyone else in their category. Anywhere they enter, there's bad luck.
Simply because they possess certain genetic differences from the majority.
What do you want?
I want to buy banana.
Please go.
Why? We all feel pain, joy, and human blood flows in all of us.
Nani people went to your shop.
It's a restaurant.
Yeah. Any naming ceremony names you want to give to it, get to it. I does not care.
Keep a date with Professor John Bull in this episode titled Not One of Us.
So these people not give the work. They said the post is no longer vacant.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow,
the largest data network. Glow Unlimited.
And to kickstart our discussion on the out-of-school children in Nigeria, let's take this background report by Ahmed Ambali.
The joyful chatter of a nation's future.
They are pupils of an Abuja-based primary school, a minute part of the millions who seek the path of education in a rapidly changing world. Over the last decade, Nigeria's exponential growth in population has put immense pressure on the country's resources and on already overstretched public services and infrastructure. With children less than 15 years of age accounting for about 45% of the country's population, the burden on education and other sectors has become overwhelming. Only recently, education activist Malala Yousafzai met acting President Yemi Osinbajo and asked him to declare what she called an education state of emergency in Nigeria. Her call reinforces the admission by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education that it was sad to note Nigeria had 10.5 million children out of school. It's a huge challenge that requires a multidimensional approach to address. In urban areas where there is pressure on facilities, teaching and learning is far from effective, with outcomes usually below expectation. In rural and sometimes urban areas, many children do not attend school because their labor is needed to either help at home or to bring additional income into the family. Another cause of low enrollment, especially in the north, is cultural bias. Most parents do not send their children, especially girls, to school and prefer to send them to Quranic schools rather than formal schools. In the last few years, especially since the launching of the Universal Basic Education Act, much has been achieved in the reconstruction of dilapidated school buildings and construction of new ones, supply of desks and other needed furniture, as well as the provision of toilet facilities. But this is yet to address the deficit, and as such, greater commitments on the part of the education managers have to be put in place. Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will also be given suggestions on how best to address the challenge of out-of-school children in Nigeria, which threatens the very foundation upon which the future of Nigeria is built.
Ahmad Ambali, thank you very much for that background report. Now we have with us in the studios to discuss the out-of-school children phenomenon, Ms. Azuka Menkiti. She is an education specialist with the United Nations Children's Fund, that's UNICEF. Ms. Menkiti, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I think from Kaduna studio, we have been joined by Professor Jonathan Andrew Nock. He's an Urban Commissioner for Education, Kaduna State. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
All right, and from Yola, the capital of Adamawa State, we have Dr. Omar Binder, Secretary to Adamawa State Government, who joined us via Skype. Thank you, Dr. Bindu, for joining us this morning all the way from Yola.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Right, Kisley.
All right, let's begin first, with Ms. Azuka Menkiti, who is with us here in the Abuja studios. With regard to the figure 10.5 million out-of-school children, we do not know whether this figure is static or whether the figure is climbing or otherwise declining, because the figure has been circulated for a number of years now. How true is this figure from what you do, what your agency does, and what your agency has been able to collate with regard to the very worrisome phenomenon of out-of-school children in Nigeria?
Yeah, talking about the figure that we have actually been using over a period of time, that's the 10.5 million children, is actually a reality. What is also worrisome to us now that it is most likely that this figure has increased based on a lot of issues that people we are dealing with in this country, especially in the Northeast. But clearly, it is clear and obvious to everybody that more than 10 million children are missing education in Nigeria, especially in northern Nigeria.
So what is the techniques? Because when we give out such figures, so one wonders how the statistics came about. What are the techniques deployed to ensure the authenticity of such figures?
In 2012, there was a global survey, global study on out-of-school children, and Nigeria was one of the countries that was the focus, and that was when these figures came up. But between 2012 and today, a lot of surveys, pockets of surveys have also been conducted. For us in UNICEF, we also started by conducting what we call community household mapping and listing of out-of-school children within different areas that we are working. Recently, in 2016, in 4 states, we conducted a community mapping of out-of-school children. And this mapping is about identifying children by location, by household. It was like a household survey, where we went house to house within a particular area. We implementing a project that is funded by Qatar Foundation. And within that project, we are working in 18 local government areas across 4 states of Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara states. So within these 18 local government areas, when we conducted this survey, we found that we had over 400,000 children who are missing education within the age cohort of 6 to 11 years. So if in just 18 local government areas in Nigeria, we're able to find that more than 400,000 children are missing education, then we're talking about 774 local government areas in Nigeria. Then you can see that even the 10.5 million children is actually it's not likely to be the number that we'll be dealing with at the moment.
Is there a dichotomy between the urban and rural areas with regard to where the numbers are higher?
Definitely. Definitely. We have more children missing education in the rural areas because that is where the poor people live. And from the survey that we conducted last year, we were able to find out that the key reasons why children are not going to school had to do with issues of poverty, issues of sociocultural practices, and also issues around policies and supply in schools. So you see that these are the people who are mostly more affected are children who are from the poor wealth quintiles, who are from the rural areas, and most of them are also girls.
All right, Ms. Azuka Menkichi, thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Let's go over now to our Kaduna Networks Center, where we earlier introduced Professor Jonathan Andrew Nock, who is the Commissioner for Education in Kaduna State. Professor Nock, you listened to Ms. Menkiti with us here in the Abuja studios talk about the figures and how, indeed, what we now should regard as, shall we say, a baseline figure of 10.5 may, in fact, have exploded well beyond that figure that we are seeing, and that the problem is getting more acute. From your perspective, including, of course, your interaction with fellow commissioners of education in the northern part of the country and elsewhere in the country, what exactly is happening with the phenomenon of out-of-school children? Why are the figures not decelerating?
Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, I would want to corroborate exactly what Ms. Azuka rightly pointed out from the background analysis with regards to issues that are quite critical and easily expressed with the high numbers that she quoted. The central issue here has to do with poverty and then also access. I would particularly want to say how we in Kaduna State, along with colleagues here in the northern states, are trying to do to mitigate the problems with regards to out-of-school children. Immediately we came into government, His Excellency Malam Nasir El-Rufai actually sent a law to the House of Assembly. There are two critical laws which were sent. The first one is a law prohibiting hawking. The second law also prohibiting begging. And the penalties are adequately stated. Now, I want to differ slightly with regards to the huge numbers for now. Perhaps they may be growing in some other states based on the concept of policy. We have, for example, enrollment figures jacking up between 2015 and 2017. Initially, by 2015, we had an enrollment in our schools of 800,000. But as I'm talking to you now, we have an enrollment of 2.1 million pupils in our schools. If you come to Kaduna, for example, and go to one particular primary school at Lokoja Road in Rigasa, we have a staggering enrollment of about 33,000 pupils in one single school. Now, I want to say, on account of some of these things that which we are doing, which actually is embedded in the concept of free basic education, we've been able to address this. Though it's not completely eradicated, though it is slow, but I do believe that if this is being sustained not just by Kaduna State but across board, that is within the northern state, these numbers would slightly go down.
Right, thank you very much, Professor Nock, but I'm still with you. You'll agree, quite frankly, that this issue of out-of-school children is bigger in the north more than other parts of the country. And, coupled with the Almajiri phenomenon, also domiciled in the north. My question is this. Since you've been interacting with other commissioners of education in northern part of the country, is there any deliberate attempt? I know that in the past dispensation, there was the schools built for Almajiris here and there. I don't know how much that is working for now, but is there any deliberate plan or an attempt to see how this issue of Almajiri schools could be put in place and ensure that these children go back to school? Because when you talk about out-of-school children in the north, the Almajiris contribute not less than 70% of them.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly, perhaps I didn't indicate this. But the Almajiri schools is one other concept that we've actually been able to integrate mainstream into what we're doing, for example, in Kaduna State. We have quite a number of the schools, close to about 24, 28. And what we've tried to do in these schools actually is to integrate the normal schooling system along with the Almajiri schools. We have a couple of them that are even boarding schools. And we have, for example, the Ministry of Education, a director that exclusively takes care of, one, ensuring that these schools are well monitored, and to the best of my recollection, the World Bank GP program, we actually use it, for example, to give scholarships, one, to particularly female pupils, and then in order to encourage the teachers in the Almajiri schools, we also have some form of welfare system which has adequately improved actually the enrollment. But as I said earlier, this is not just a one solution thing. A couple of months ago, myself, the Commissioner of Education in Sokoto State, Gombe State, Borno, Ayobe State, went on the IVLP program in the United States, and these are some of the issues which we discussed. We have a small group that is actually also dedicated in trying to see how these problems are being addressed holistically.
All right, Professor Nock, thank you very much. Let's bring in Dr. Umar Bindri, that's the Secretary to the State Government of Adamawa. Into the conversation, we earlier introduced him and you saw him on the screen a while ago. He's joining us via Skype. Dr. Umar Bindri, the out-of-school children phenomenon, it's one that's is an intractable problem, as it were, because if the figures are still climbing, then it would appear that very little dent has been made on this challenge. From what you know, exactly what is happening at the moment, and why is it that in the plenitude of programs that we've had over the years have not made any corrective impact?
Yeah, thank you very much. You are right. The numbers of out-of-school children is very, very alarming in this country, irrespective of the region. And in my estimation, this should have been the first subject of the constitutional amendment. In the Constitution, it should be stated that every single child in Nigeria must have access to free and quality basic education. And then we can task ourselves to implement that. In fact, the amendment should read that if you don't achieve that in your state, either as a governor or in your local government, as a chairman or the federal intervention from the federal, you should actually go to jail. This should be very, very clearly set. Because as far as I'm concerned, you have like 4 baskets of this system. The first basket is children who reach the age of 5 and have no way to access education. And there's a large pool of these children. And the second basket are children who have gone through primary education from primary 1 to 6. Every year, some are dropping through the basket. And you end up with another basket of children that you may term that they have gone to primary 1 and they have dropped out, or primary 2, they have dropped out. These ones are also out of school. Then you have the third basket, which is children at the secondary school that again from Form 1 or JS1 to JS3, SS1 to SS3, and they're dropping through the baskets again because there's examination at this level. You have another young people before you go to the tertiary education. If the statistics is right, in my estimation, this is huge. This thing that you hear 2 million, 3 million, it's a complete fallacy. It is not true, I can tell you. I don't think we have even institutionalized the way to capture the statistics correctly. And this out-of-school education is not a magic. First, you have to have a school, and you must have classrooms. Otherwise, without a school, children will not go. There are areas that don't have school at all. In Adamawa State, for example, what we've done is to chip the whole state. The 3 senatorial districts, we break it into all the 21 local governments. In each local government, we break it into all the 226 wards. The wards, we broke it into villages and communities. In every village, we document what kind of school have you got, including Arabic school. These are all opportunities for children to go and listen to somebody. And therefore, it is this system. We have included the traditional rulers, we've included the youth leaders, we've included the women groups. All these NGOs and CBOs working in these communities must be involved in capturing statistics and knowing exactly what is happening with education. We are now developing a real database on the strata of various opportunities for education and how many children are actually floating around. If we think everybody will have to go to secondary school, will have to go to university, we're just wasting our time. The institutions have to be set that children that cannot go to formal education must be able to do things that are compatible to children not going to formal education. Children that have dropped out of primary school should go to these vocational centers. They must be developed. Children that have dropped out of secondary school must go to technical schools. But here we are, our education system is even rolling around. Polytechnics are becoming universities. Universities are becoming polytechnics. In the universities, you get diplomas. In polytechnics, you can get degrees. This mix-up is confusing the whole system to the extent that the implication of out-of-school children is huge. Actually, the declaration of state of emergency in this sector is a necessity. And I conclude this part by saying that it must be in the Constitution that we should include children to go to school is a must. Not just school. It should be quality and free.
Thank you, Dr. Bindu. I want to stay with you. You have done a good analysis, of the situation. Now, Nigeria is a country with a huge natural and human resources, and of course talking about what happened in the 80s and so in the 60s, even 50s, in the educational sector. Nigeria did very well in that sector, but it's almost a shock, what we're getting today. If you had listened to Azuka Menkete, she talked about 10 million, children by UNICEF's estimation, and of course she explained the standard, the procedure that they used to, get to that figure. Now, where did we get it wrong? You have now tried to prefer a solution as to should be in the Constitution and what have you. Now, where did we derail, and how do we, get back, to form again?
I think it's not the aspect of derailing. That system in those days when His Excellency the late Awolowo declared education literally in a state of emergency in the West, and in the North, you remember Sardauna of Sokoto literally declared a state of emergency on education. It's not necessarily that everybody went to primary school, secondary school, and universities. You remember, particularly in the North, in those days, there is agricultural training up to, technician level or apprentice level, because the comparative advantage of the region is agriculture. And you saw that people had things to do. There was a lot of agriculture production to the extent that we were exporting. The same thing was happening in the East and the South, West. But then there was a huge explosion of population, and also what we may think is a success in availability of purchasing power and money. When the oil economy came, all these areas of comparative advantages slowed down. Literally, the reason why we go to school is actually to get skills and know-how to be able to build up our sanity to do one or two things. And then when the other factors of production collapsed, and then we became now only dependent on the cash cow, the oil economy, everything started breaking into pieces. And we forgot about agriculture, we forgot about industry, we forgot about education, we forgot about the development of healthcare. Everything, we just started riding on, if you have money, you're fine. If you don't have money, you're not fine. And all the other bad things started creeping up, and then this is a mess we're in.
All right, Dr. Umar Bindri, SSG to Adamawa State Government, we'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. But one takeaway from your earlier explanation has to do with the next question, which I'm going to ask Ms. Azuka Menkete right here with us in the studios. Because Dr. Bindri was saying, look, if you have a number of baskets and people are dropping out of school, at certain levels, at certain stages, what then do you do to redirect their knowledge and skill for them to acquire skills and so on and so forth? The basic question ought to therefore be, who is an out-of-school child? Is it a child who is not, undergoing, let's say, religious studies, a child who's not acquiring technical skills or learning how to become a trader and so on? So who's an out-of-school child?
Okay, before I respond to this, I want to also state here that the Nigerian Constitution has actually stated that every child has a right to access basic education. Article 18 of Chapter 3 of the Constitution of this country states...
That's Chapter 2.
Chapter 2 of Article 18 of Chapter 2 actually states very clearly that every Nigerian child has a right to access quality education. And then the federal government has also gone further to articulate the same right in the National Policy on Education of 2013 that says that that must be provision of quality education for every Nigerian to make sure that every Nigerian child accesses his or her right to education. The UBE Act of 1999 also stated that every Nigerian child should have access to quality education. So in Nigeria, the issues is not about policies, about constitutional rights. It's also because all of these have been clearly stated. Last year or early this year, the current Minister of Education launched what he called the Ministerial Strategic Plan, which actually prioritizes the issues around out-of-school children. The problem is about implementation. The problem is about enforcing whatever has been stated in different policy documents. Talking about who actually constitutes out-of-school children, the survey that UNICEF conducted in 2012 actually came up to say that there are different categories of out-of-school children. The first category are children who are not accessing any education, any form of formal education. By formal education, what do we mean? Formal education, we mean education that actually provides with basic content of learning that helps you to compete outside your environment. The second component of groups of out-of-school children are children, they found out that there are children who are likely never to even enroll in school, who are, no matter what happens, if nothing serious happens, that they are likely to stay out of school. And then the third group of children who are out of school are children who dropped out. So these are the three groups of children, like the SHG talked about, who drop out of the, from the basket. So these are the three groups of children who are categorized as being out of school. Those who are not in school at the moment, those who are likely to drop out, those who are actually drop out, and also those who are likely to miss education.
What is a school under this construct?
Yes, a school. There are a lot of controversies now about actually the children who are in formal schools and children who are. So the survey we conducted, we were able to come out to say that these are the children who are not in formal education system. Currently, UNICEF is also looking at the fact that, because when we conducted the survey, we tried to find out why are children not in school. And apart from the sociocultural practices and issues within, around the context where these children live, there are also issues of preference of the type of education that parents prefer for their children. So we found out that some parents actually prefer religious education. And these are currently these groups of children who are accessing only religious education are categorized as not being in school. And a lot of arguments have been, has come out. Different schools of thought have said, why? Why would you categorize those who are accessing only religious education as being out of school? And some have said, well, it would be unfair for these children who are not accessing formal education to be counted as if they're accessing formal education. So what UNICEF is doing at the moment is to come up, apart from other interventions that we are actually embarking on, is also to say, if this is the difference for these groups of children, to stay, access religious education, then can we get there and incorporate some level of basic education, content of basic education where they are, so that these children are not left alone to just access the religious education. So we don't, wherever they want to be, we want to meet them where they are.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, Kirian, just before you come in, I know that you're itching to ask a question. Yes, in broad categorization, it's often said that you have more out-of-school children in the northern part of the country. But some reports in the past had also indicated that the problem was equally acute in the southeastern part of the country. Ebonyi, for instance, and Anambra, where people are more interested in trading. That's what I was talking about. So listen, if a chap becomes an apprentice at a young age and he gets into trading, we know that the governor, one of the former governors of Ebonyi, tried to do something with regard to pulling the children who have been found to be hawkers in urban areas, getting them back into school. So what is the situation now with regard to out-of-school children in the southeastern part of the country?
Well, I happen to come from the southeast, and I also work in the north. So I understand the two contexts very clearly. I've also told people severally that the issues around access to education are in the north and in the southeast. Southeast is not exactly the same issues. In the north, for instance, the issues around the girl who is not accessing her right to education and that contribute to the chunk of the number of children who are out of school is about the fact that this girl is being denied access to her right to education. Some culture, the context, some people around her who do not believe that she should access education take those decisions for her. In the southeast, I know that Ebonyi is a critical case, but in the southeast, for instance, in Anambra State, these boys we're talking about have actually attained basic education. Most of them have attained basic education. Most of them, and then it is about their choice to decide to leave school. They feel that having attained primary education, that it's comfortable enough for them to get into what they think is a better option for them to make money. So for me, for the issues around Anambra State is a bigger issue of the economic situation in the country and the value system within the environment that these children exist. So it is not the same thing to begin to put them at par with the issues of children missing education in northern Nigeria. For in the southeast, for instance, especially Anambra State, the boys go through basic education, but they leave because they have looked at the process of getting a degree, and they feel that, no, why would I waste my time going through senior secondary education, going into university education for 4 years, if I can quickly get into the market, get a master, become an apprentice, and within the 4 years of apprenticeship, he comes out and he gets this cup of this glass. He buys it from 5 naira from you, and he goes to the next shop, he sells it for 10 naira, and he makes money. He hasn't stolen any money. So he feels that it's a waste of time to go into that long process before, and again, but when they look at those who have actually gone to school, the failure of the system, economic system, also affects this decision. So it is exactly not the same thing with the fact that the children in some parts of northern Nigeria are not even assessing their right to basic education that will even give them the opportunity of making choices for themselves.
Okay, I wanted to clear some of this because the issue of Ebonyi State is actually sometimes a refusal to attend school. I mean, it is basic. That I don't want to go to school, and that's it. They don't have access. And that was why the then governor wanted to force them to school. And the case of Anambra is a good analysis of what happens in Anambra. Actually, you know, they start somewhere, end, and get into business. You know, and these are the millionaires today that you hear in Anambra.
Well, they still fall into one of those several baskets that Dr. Bindi was talking about.
Everything is about enriching yourself in terms of knowledge and in terms of economic skill, stability and skill too, because trading is skill as well. So now I wanted to clear this as an educationist. What is the solution to all of this? You know, because you talked about implementation, which is key to all of that. Well, after policy, because Dr. Bindel was talking about putting it in the Constitution, but you have just cited, you know, that it's already there in the Constitution. Apart from that, other policies...
But not justiciable. That's why
justiciable, who will you take to court for such? The most important thing is that it is there. Now, what can be done about implementation?
Well, let me talk about what we are doing currently as UNICEF and working with the Federal Ministry of Education and the Universal Basic Education Commission. Last year, we came up with what we call the National Enrollment Drive Framework. Looking at the huge number of children missing education, we decided to work with the Federal Ministry of Education and UBEC to come up with a framework that will provide kind of guideline for all the states in Nigeria to implement and bring these children and reduce the number of children who are missing education. And within this enrollment drive framework, we are clearly, the document states clearly what each state should do, what the national government should do. So recently, last week, we were in Kaduna to organize a national planning meeting for Ebonyi was there. We brought 10 states that we felt had very high level number of children missing education. We brought 10 states together plus Ebonyi State to look at how we can move forward in terms of ensuring that children awareness is created. So it's more of creating more awareness. But this year we are looking at, we have also dedicated 2 weeks of what I call enrollment week, where we are asking every politician to go back to your base. Every public holder, go back to your base. Within these 2 weeks, let us make as much noise as possible. Let us also look at the issues of supply to make sure that the schools are also there, that the facilities are there, so that when the demand increases, and then the supply is able to match demand. So currently, we are trying to do an elaborate work with government to conduct elaborate campaign of awareness creation, changing a lot of mindsets on the value of education. But beyond that, we're also working with government of some states to implement cash transfer programs, where we talk to sensitize parents and say, because we have identified that poverty is an issue and issues of opportunity cost for girls. When some girls are asking girls to come to school, meanwhile these girls are part of income earners for the family, and then so for these families it's a double tragedy for them. And then you ask the girl to come to school, so the family is losing the income that the girl is bringing, and at the same time the direct or indirect cost of education is also affecting the pockets of these families. So we have implemented what we call the cash transfer program in Sokoto, Niger, and we are doing that in Zamfara and Kebbi State with the state government, to see how that with a little amount of money, between 5,000 and 8,000 naira per family, per girl, per beneficiary per term, that this can also support the family. So a lot of interventions is going on at the moment, and then the government is also implementing school feeding program, which I'm not in a very good position to talk about. But the problem is when these children were also looking beyond the increasing demand, because we know that when we embark on this massive campaign to change mindsets, to change behavior, negative attitudes towards the value of education, then the government also has to begin to look at the supply side of it so that demand can match supply.
All right. Thank you very much, Azuka Menkiti. Let's return to Kaduna, where Professor Jonathan Nock is still with us. Professor Nock, well, what other incentives can possibly be activated to ensure that there are higher numbers of pupils, getting enrolled in, and then, of course, completing their education up to whatever level they wish to? Azuka here with us has already indicated what has been done, cash incentives. We also know of the school feeding program. Tell us if that has made a dent whatsoever on the problem in Kaduna, and what in particular also can the traditional institutions do? Could you possibly go around and say, look, any traditional area or any local area where you have out-of-school children, there will be some sanctions or some incentives for the traditional head?
Thank you. Just like Ms. Azuka indicated again, the key issues with regards to mitigating the problem of out-of-school children, as she said, has to do with implementation. And from onset, I talked about the two laws that were promulgated in the state about 1.5 years ago. That is the law prohibiting begging and the law also prohibiting hawking. Now, added to this, what are the other incentives? She also mentioned about the school feeding. And it is absolutely true that we equally realize that the school feeding tremendously improve the enrollment of pupils back in schools. In most of the campaigns that we do, yes, we equally involve traditional rulers, like when we were launching the Girl Child Scholarships. In each and every senatorial district that we go to, we involve the traditional rulers along with the district heads along. We have also ensured that in some of the boarding schools, like the Almajiri schools, we have consistently engaged traditional rulers, along with other key stakeholders and politicians involved within those districts. I would want to particularly say this, that we've actually observed a very huge increase with regards to enrollment, and that's why I'm very particular about our numbers. And do we have a very congent mechanism to actually measure these things? Yes. We initially had an enrollment, for example, of about 800,000. That was as of 2015. But as of today that I'm talking to you, we have an enrollment of about 2.1 million pupils in our schools. Now, the concept of the free basic education, I think it has actually helped quite well. Suffice to say that from the onset, yes, these things are embedded in the Constitution, which clearly makes it compulsory with regards to access to qualitative education. Two, the other issue has to do with infrastructure, because once parents or people see the kind of schools their children are prone to go to, as it was done in former times, you are having schools that are fine, you are having chairs, you have facilities out there, yeah, then you are actually having, you are more prone to have people come to the school rather than once the schools don't even exist. Now, that's one thing that we as a government have actually strived to do by going into unprecedented renovation of schools and ensuring that we have good infrastructure in there. This we have clearly realized that has improved significantly. And of course, we have equally involved religious leaders, both Christians and Muslims, in ensuring that parents are being encouraged to ensure that their children actually go to these schools. We equally have a monitoring group, of course, with our partners like DFID, UNICEF, and other NGOs, to actually come and see how we are able to work in synergy to see that these bad numbers decrease. Like here also in Kaduna, we have GPS maps of all the schools we have in the state, and we can tell you precisely the teacher, the number of pupils in each class, and quite a number of other things that would help us actually in ensuring that our projections are quite clear. Also finally, I want to say this, and this is what also we have been discussing with other states nearby. Like in Kaduna State, in 2015, 2016, we had 33% of our budget dedicated to education. And now in 2016, 2017, we upped it by 35%. So we've even gone beyond the 26%, which is the threshold being kept by UNICEF. So once we are able to holistically address most of these issues by taking these factors together, I do believe that we would be able to mitigate the problems with regards to the out-of-school children.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Dr. Bindri now. Let's go to Dr. Bindri now. Dr. Bindri, you told us how the Adamawa State government had taken stock of the situation in that state, and we're able to map out areas to do some mapping to determine where schools are needed, even at the ward level. That's a good job there. But my question would be, we've heard from Professor Nock that there's increase in enrollment in Kaduna State. Is that the same story in Adamawa State? And again, what are we doing with what we used to know as a nomadic education in that area? So put all of that together and let's know your stake.
Well, thank you, Kirian. Before coming to Adamawa State, you see, I heard what Madam said about the existence of statements in the Constitution to do with basic education. Look, the issue is not a statement in the Constitution. The issue is an implementation. In fact, if I have my way, I will have an EFCC model for basic education. It is about enforcement. You cannot have a country, a big country like Nigeria, with minimum of 200 million people. All must eat. We must travel. We must have security. We must enjoy ourselves. We want to watch TV and so on and so forth. And think education we're still talking about enrollment. In countries, like you'd go to many countries, they don't even have enrollment in their dictionary. When you say, oh, the enrollment in our country is 50%, they haven't got a clue what you're saying. These are backward statements. They must be removed by enforcement. Being in the Constitution is not enough. Secondly, I have always had this analysis. Northern children are lower, they don't go to school, girls and so on. This is, look, a school, what is a school? A school must have classrooms, it must have facilities, it must have teachers, and it must have an organization sort of. I have not seen in this country where there's this organization, a school, and then children don't go there. The issue is that it's just not available. For example, myself, I have a PhD now in engineering, right? My father was an Islamic scholar. He never took me to school. But there was a system of a local person. They call him the messenger. He checks every house. Who is a 5-year-old here? He knows all the houses. And that was how I was identified. That was how my brothers and sisters were identified. They had to be taken to school. In those days, the numbers were very low. But for now, the numbers are very high. I know for one, in my environment, you can get a 25-year-old boy who has 3 wives and he has got 15 children. He himself is not educated. He himself has got no job and he's still living in his parents' house. Many people have got this type of things. Therefore, this zonal or state or regional analysis doesn't help the situation. The issue is to take this country as a country. Everywhere you go to in Nigeria, poverty is a problem. It is above 50, 60%. And therefore, we must take our country and stop this comparative thing saying, oh, this is low. And in the north, this girl child is not really as serious as people use it. Every mother now is trying to make sure that their children, girl children, go to school. The issue is that the schools are not there. If the schools are available, sometimes they are very far. Even when you go to school, there are no teachers. Even if there are no teachers, there are no books, there are no chalk, and so on and so forth. This is the issue. Therefore, when you go back to the constitutional things, these things must be available. And more so, as an incentive I heard the professor talking about, teachers must be lifted to the level of teachers. In my days, a teacher is the best person. All of us wanted to be teachers. They must have good incentives in terms of salaries. In primary schools, there should be houses like before. The headmaster used to have a house. The games master used to have a house. The science teacher used to have a house. Now, you get a school, even private schools, the 4 walls of the school are all rooms. And everybody, even to pick your children when they have closed, is a problem in Nigeria. So, as far as I'm concerned, there are incentives that we know we can do. There are things that we must do. And this enrollment in school, out of school children is a huge problem. I am a scientist. I am a technologist. I'm an innovator. I'm an expert in intellectual property. I can tell you, if we continue at this rate, we cannot survive in the global way of doing things. In fact, even if we have all the children back to school, we must go back to who should study science, who should study technology, who should study law. We should be talking at that level. Otherwise, our police must be graduates too. They must know how to utilize ICT and so on and so forth. Our custom officers must be very at the highest level. Therefore, this basic education, we have to get it right. Again, I close by saying it is not just in the Constitution. The system must establish an EFCC type of implementation, regulation, and enforcement institution that when you go out as a political person to go and contest, we cannot have you as a ward council. You don't even know how many schools you have, how many children are there who are in and out. Local government chairman must know very in detail the education system in there, not to talk of governors and up to the president and so on. This channel of leadership must be aware of the challenges we have in education and what we must have to do. This is my concluding remark.
All right, well, we're not signing you off here just yet, Dr. Bindu, because I have another question, another perspective that I would like you to speak to, and of course the other guests will also have the opportunity of addressing this. Now, there are some persons who have remarked that uncontrolled population growth in the country is perhaps a huge part of the problem that we face with the rising numbers of out-of-school children. And there is always a comparison with the fact that, look, Nigeria's population growth is somewhere not less than 3%, and yet the rate of economic growth is far less than that. And that going forward, we're going to face, huge economic challenges. And the fact that we continue to grapple with these numbers, what can be done to address this? I mean, we know that there are often socio-cultural issues arising from this, but we know there are also socio-economic problems to deal with in huge populations. We can brag about being 170, 180, 200 or whatever numbers, but if the depth of poverty and some of these worrisome data still continue to stare us on the face, what do we do?
Well, the issue of population growth, I mean, even China is reconsidering its one-child policy. Yes, there's a need to give a lot of information, graphic and non-graphic, on the challenges of economic pressure if you have large numbers. But certainly, this country needs the numbers too. Poverty is an indication that we are not doing well. I mean, anywhere you go to in this country, we have garbage that cannot be evacuated. That is jobs, needing people to do it. We need food, and we're importing a lot of food, including fish. We need people to actually fish and produce food. We have so many roads. In fact, there is not one single road in Nigeria that you can go for 200 kilometers that is smooth. So there's a lot of work to do. We don't have railway the way we should. Our own modernization or city development is very, very slow. But on the other side, we have a lot of people who are either uneducated or not, or looking for jobs or whatever. So the scenario is we have jobs without workers, and we have potential workers without jobs. To connect these two, you need education. Education, skill building, competencies, exposure, and so on and so forth is what is required. If you get that right, population is not a problem. But if you don't get this right, then population is a problem. But certainly, I have to conclude by saying, yes, at the level of development we are, people need information. People need examples. People need to be told. Even as SSG in Yola, this is my hometown, I know what I'm talking about. People run to me saying, I have not eaten yesterday. This is so primitive at the lowest level. I said, well, if you have not eaten yesterday, you want to eat today, and you don't have the means to eat tomorrow, you are dead. So this is literally my summary, is that population is not really a problem, but actually how do we manage it? And education is key.
All right, Dr. Bindre, thank you very much. Very quickly, Mr. Zuka Menkiti, what's your take on the population explosion, the fact that our population growth remains uncontrolled, and the knock-on effect it's having on the out-of-school children phenomenon?
Yeah, well, I am not a population expert, but then our strategy is not directly in trying to reduce the population, but we know that if girls come to school and stay, because one of the key issues that one of our issues about out-of-school children is the fact that girls are married out early. And when a girl begins to bear children early, she's more likely to have more children than a girl who started later. So our strategy is to encourage more girls to get to school, at least finish secondary education before she gets into marriage. And from that perspective, when a girl gets into school and is allowed to finish basic education and probably finish secondary education, and that at that point begins to think about getting married, and that is also a way of reducing the number of children that this particular girl will be able to bear. So our strategy is not to say, don't get married, don't begin to bear children, but allow this girl to go to school, at least stay 12 years minimum 12 years minimum in school, and after that 12 years, then this girl, who would have grown from being a child into an adolescent, so to say, can begin to look at having children. So in that perspective, from that perspective, that is how for us in education, is trying to deal with issues of population explosion.
Well, I would think that many Nigerians are not even much concerned with respect to population or no population. It's still planning and planning, as we talked about. Professor Nock talked about infrastructure as well, which of course will determine who wants to go to a school where there's no infrastructure. In fact, today in Nigeria, there are many primary schools where they don't have chairs or chairs to sit. They sit on the bare floor. Many, in fact, almost in all the states of this federation, perhaps except Lagos, River State, and some others. But majority of these states still have children sit on the bare floor, for education. So who would want to go there? I mean, that's not attraction.
Yeah, but numbers are significant.
But if we
are having 180 million persons, do we have the capacity?
We have resources that if we have been building schools, or we have schools to go to. That's the point.
That is the if.
that's the implementation thing that you talked about. So let's go to Twitter now. Some people have been reaching us via tweets and from different parts of the country. And let's begin by telling you that Victor Oshozumwa says the high rate of out-of-school children is due primarily to religion, poverty, cultural and wrong educational policies of government.
Now, Kolo Ibrahim tweets, the phenomenon is a consequence of the dysfunctionality of our education system and the manifestation of corruption in the sector. The literacy and nomadic education commissions have to be restructured and adequately funded to redress the phenomenon.
Now, Festus Akimboyewa, time to prioritize primary enrollment in Nigeria, particularly in the north, to reduce the number of out-of-school children in Nigerian primary education. Well, it should be compulsory in Nigerian, and school environments should be made attractive, just what I've just mentioned a while ago. Crumbling school buildings will discourage enrollment.
Now, Obina Agbo tweets, I'm not surprised at this. That's the phenomenon of out-of-school children, because these kids see their other graduates roam the streets while they drop out. Of course, it's a bit staggered here, why the dropouts get to do well later.
All right, Dele Jackson Solomon, federal and state governments, NGOs, and religious leaders need to expedite action in investigating the educational infrastructure and sensitize parents on this.
But Amasi Adamu tweets, the primary and secondary enrollment should be free to encourage the citizens, and also the evils of unemployment must be tackled.
Obin Nabo once again says, give graduates some tax incentives, make policies or politics less attractive, and you will see everybody struggling to go back to school.
Shani Makalomakoji, one of our regulars, tweets, says the last administration came up with the Majiri initiative, and there was significant increase in enrollment. That should be sustained.
Obianu Ju says alleviate and empower the parents to avoid more numbers, shun corruption. I don't know what she means here now.
And Bayo Adebayo tweets, children dropping out of school is caused by government policy makers to maintain political dynasty for themselves and their children. All right, now those are some of the tweets that we are taking. In the meantime, we'll go on this short break. When we return, of course, we'll continue with the program. Now, this is still Good Morning Nigeria. We're reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. If you recall, at the beginning of the program, we did indicate that we had two items to deal with in our conversation segment. We've been discussing out-of-school children phenomenon. We still have our three guests. Dr. Umar Bindril, SSG to Adamawa State Government, joining us via Skype, is still on hold. Then the Commissioner for Education in Kaduna State, Professor Nok, is still with us in Kaduna, and then right here with us in the Abuja studios, Azuka Menkiti, an education specialist with UNICEF. But we also indicated that we'll be taking on matters arising from the massacre that occurred at Ozobulu in Anambra State last week, when some gunmen stormed the church and then killed some of the worshippers. No fewer than 11 or 12. Of course, the Anambra State Governor, that's Willie Obino, has indicated indicated that the State Police Command has made some arrests of suspects, who were alleged to have been behind that incident that took place at St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Ozobolo in the Ekusigo local government area of the state. Now, the state governor has indicated, has also made a statewide broadcast, indicating what the government needs to do and giving assurance to the people. But before we bring in our guest, who is joining us via Skype, is the Honorable Commissioner for Information in that state. Let's join our correspondent, Benson Osadebe, with this report.
The traditional ruler of Ozobulu, Obifidelis Oruche, said the community is still in shock over the attack and beckoned on the federal and state governments to ensure that those behind the attack are brought to justice. He also condoled with the bereaved families and called for calm. A visit to the venue of the attack revealed that the church premises has been cordoned off, with security agents keeping watch. Some of the victims of the attack, who are receiving treatment at Access Specialist Hospital Ozobolo, are in stable condition. Meanwhile, some members of the community and other people of the state have described the attack as callous and abominable. Commercial and social activities are ongoing in the town, with people carrying on their normal day-to-day duties.
All right, thank you very much for that report. Let's see what's happening, because we're supposed to be joined via Skype by the Anambra State Commissioner for Information. We've just learned that that studio is not yet set for him to reach us via Skype, but we are going to return to Anambra very shortly. For now, let's get back to our studio in Abuja and continue with our discussion on out-of-school children. But be reminded that we'll get back to Anambra because we need an update on the Ozobolo saga, which of course has been viral since 2 days that event took place in that part of Anambra State, actually in the Ekusigo local government area of Anambra State. Right now we're still with Menkete. Well, we've talked about infrastructure. As a UNICEF personnel, what would you talk about? What would we say about infrastructure? Because we believe that infrastructure is also part of what should attract school enrollment, not the situation where pupils don't have where to sit in the class, don't have books, as Dr. Bindru said earlier on. And what would you think the situation should be or ought to be under normal circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. The issue of out-of-school children is a combination of factors, which I said earlier is about demand and supply. Infrastructure is looking at areas of supply, making sure that teachers are there, making sure that the classrooms are there. And, we also always want to go back to what has been put in a policy document. The UBE law states that there must be a school within 2 kilometers of child's residence. But unfortunately, what we find today is that, like he said rightly, that a lot of children who are willing to go to school have to trek kilometers, and some of these factors are part of what discourages parents from sending their children to school. As UNICEF, we are also looking at all of this holistically. While we are looking at increasing access, we are also working on increasing quality of education. We are working with different institutions, both at the state and national level, to improve the quality of education. I once met a small girl who is out of school who said, "See, madam," we were talking to a girl from the nomadic community, and she said, "Can you listen to what the teacher is doing?" And as we were listening to what the teacher was telling the children, the teacher was dancing, singing songs with the children to kill time. Apparently, this girl said, "He doesn't know anything, he doesn't have anything to teach. Why would I leave the cattle? Why would I leave the support I give to my parents to come to school? When I come here and I waste my time, the teacher doesn't even know what to teach." So there are also serious issues of the quality of teachers, also serious issues about the quantity. So for us in UNICEF, we are advocating for improved quality, and we're also working with states to support the quality of teachers, but we're also advocating for the quantity of teachers. We go to some rural schools, there's only one headmaster. the headmaster and one teacher, and you have a population of about 100 children. So it's a serious issue about quality, and this is also part of the issue that parents are dealing with, losing confidence in the quality of education. Some parents will tell you that there's no difference between the girl who is at home and that girl who has supposedly finished primary 6. So it's a combination of factors, which I know that if the government of this country at different levels, the complication of the management of education in Nigeria is also part of the issues. Nigeria, in Nigeria, the states are autonomous, but funds are centrally managed. So these are the complications. But what we are doing is that to advocate, to get the attention of those who should do what they should do, to say, so part of what we are doing is mapping of schools, to say this is the number of out-of-school children in this vicinity, and we need to have this number of schools. And this, as a school, that are standard. So these are all part of what UNICEF is doing to ensure that infrastructure, and then again, that the demand also meets able to match with supply.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, just to inform our viewers that we've been making efforts to re-establish link with our guest in Anambra State, who happens to be Commissioner for Information Anambra State, Honorable Tony Nacheta, but that effort has not yielded any fruit, as we are still having difficulty along the line of communication with via Skype, to reach him from Oka. Well, we're still on Good Morning Nigeria, and we are resorting to our initial topic, which is out-of-school children. Now, let's go back to Kaduna now, where we have Professor Nock. Professor Nock, Azoka raised a number of issues here, one of which is the issue of infrastructure, lack of an adequate number of teachers to teach a particular number of children, lack of quality teachers as well. What is the situation in Kaduna and any other part of the north, do you think?
Okay, thank you again. One thing I would actually want to align myself to what Dr. Bindru stated right from the onset. The key problem that we're having is not just the laws that are being established, but the implementation, and that invariably means enforcement. And I will still want to take a leap from what we are doing in the state with regards to implementation. One, for example, part of the incentives that we gave, which I didn't mention earlier, is the school uniforms, which are being given out free of charge to pupils from primaries 1 through 6, and also new intakes in JSS 1. Now, the uniforms are one key things that you use actually to make the children get attracted to see themselves go into most of these schools. And two, the infrastructure issue with regards to even the school building, how neat the schools are. For example, we are trying to completely abolish the use of blackboards for magnetic whiteboards. These are equally things which, if you check in our media houses locally here in Kaduna, we've made these issues quite clear to the public. And a lot of people are actually keyed in, and that informs what I had earlier stated, the improvement in enrollment. I also wish to say that what the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria is doing is quite wonderful, to professionalize the teaching profession, so that not just anyone comes into the class and is being allowed to teach. Something like a silent attitude that you watch in some of the teachers in the schools is not really because they cannot teach, but they are not actually cut out for such a profession. And so the issues now that has to do with licensing teachers and different grades of license which are being given out and enforced by the Teachers Registration Council, I think is a step in the right direction. Now, besides that, once the profession is given its own due, the incentives now with regards to the salaries they are being paid, being allowed to go for conferences, improvement also in the curricula, that we are having in our primary and secondary schools is one also good thing. Dr. Bindel talked about even space. You see even some private schools, you don't even have space to play games as it used to be in former times. You should have students that will have enough space to play soccer, to be able to play basketball, to be able to interact. So it's not just hanging out just in the classroom alone and the teacher taking you through the lessons. It's even unhealthy to stay through the stretch period apart from the break time, and then until closing hours of the school, then you walk away. This in itself would not actually improve this. But if you are having pupils realizing when you go there, there's a time when you go for breakfast, there's a time for games where you come out and interact, and then you are having the teachers being excited and happy. These are key things that would tremendously also improve the contribution of teachers. Just like Mr. Azuka said, you are having a teacher who is busy dancing to make up for the time. It's absolutely wrong. For example, in Kaduna State, we have what we call the Director Tutor Program. What is the Director Tutor Program? You can sit in the secondary school as a teacher and rise to the level of a permanent secretary on GL 17. And so that does not really push you, put pressure on you to see maybe you go back to any of the ministries or any other place before you rise up to that level. So we have actually a very clear policy on how you would be able to rise to the level of a director tutor, which gives you the status of a permanent secretary. So I think these things in aggregate terms are things to be addressed. Implementation dealing with enforcement of law. For example, if you are being given uniform, if you are not paying fees, the books you are being given are free of charge, then there will be no reason for you to be hanging outside to talk about either school fees and stuff like that. And then, yes, this thing could be in the Constitution, but if you try to expand it to see that there is a very clear direction on how these laws can be enforced in the whole country, then it would give us a very great improvement with regards to not just enrollment, but also the quality of education that we're giving our children.
All right, Professor Nock, thank you very much. Let's go back again to Dr. Omar Bindel. Dr. Omar Bindel, let's get your closing thoughts now, finally, as it were, on what can be done. Are there, well, we're always looking for shortcuts, but are there quick fixes in addition to the raft of policies and measures and incentives that have either been discussed or that are already also in place? In particular, for instance, if there's a huge gap in the number of teachers, the N-Power program of the federal government is meant to shock that gap. Are there other things that we could also possibly do?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I think so. I think just like we're discussing now, it would have been nice to see very high-powered conferences at the highest level where all governors will attend and discuss education. You have people who should tell them exactly what to do. It is not about, I mean, if you start going from one place to the other, you will hear people beginning to compete. Oh, I'm doing this in my state, I'm very good. But the issue with education is that if you get it right, you will see the impact. If you don't get it right, you will not see the impact. It doesn't matter what you do. So this advocacy, like Madame said, we must be able to take it at every level that education is key. It will help in ensuring that parents understand. It will help to make people understand that the economics or the development of the economy depends on that. It will help to ensure that even safety and security and other issues on insecurity depends on it. It will help to ensure that people understand that jobs linked to education is also farming, it's also cleaning the garbage, and so on and so forth. It's not always white collar. So, for example, in our state, where we're very, very strategic and evidence-based, His Excellency went around and checked so many schools. There is not one single school where our governor visited and he was happy. He used to break down, and that was why he came back and declared a state of emergency. Then he left it to us. Myself, Commissioner of Education, the Chief of Staff, and so on, we put our heads together, the whole cabinet, and we discussed this for 3 days to make sure that what do we do. So now if you come with any model, I mean, Madam should know this, UNICEF or anybody who comes with any model, it has to be keyed into the way we're thinking. Otherwise, we will say, no, don't bring a new thing here and tell us that you are expert, you are this. We know what we're doing, and we'll show you. We'll show you the evidences. We'll show you the pictures. We'll show you the statistics. So communicating with leaders is very important. Motivate them to understand this criticism that you are not doing well, you are terrible, will not help us. So for us, we take it to that level, and we believe that if we do that, then even in the schools, they will pick up. We now encourage commissioners to visit primary schools, to visit secondary schools. We encourage the traditional leaders, including our own top, our own paramount ruler, to visit primary schools and so on and so forth. We try to mix private school managers and public school managers, all to transmit information. This has to be going on and on and on and on, make sure that maybe at the end of the day we might get it right.
All right, that's Dr. Umar Bendre, Secretary to the State Government of Adamawa, joining us via Skype from Yola. Always a delight having you, Dr. Bendre. Thanks a lot for your contribution. So we'd like to appreciate the Honorable Commissioner for Education in Kaduna State, Professor Jonathan Nock, joining us from our Kaduna Network studios. Thanks a lot for being part of our discussion this morning.
Thank you very much.
Our appreciation also to Ms. Azuka Menkiti, Education Specialist with UNICEF, who was with us right here in our Abuja studios. Ms. Menkiti, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And
All right.
Don't forget to also thank Commissioner for Information, Anambra, who made frantic efforts.
Well, unfortunately, he never came on. Yes. That's a matter that we'll take up subsequently.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to sports. Of course, the glorious career